Hi there and welcome to the Pod, the Northwest's newest all-purpose recording studio for content creators. If you've got something to say and need a place to say it, search for podpod.uk. In all the usual social channels, give us a like and a follow and get in touch to reserve your time to create. So we're here today for our next Proper Good podcast. Today we've got Alice, the founder and managing director of ReMade Wigan.
I just call myself whatever sometimes. Sometimes I'm CEO, sometimes I'm managing director,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just person.
Yeah. Well, that's what we do in our sector. We don't like giving ourselves titles. We're just the jack of all trades. We do everything. So just tell us a bit about ReMade. So you've been going for, how many years have you been going for now?
We are about to head to our fourth year
Fantastic.
of operation, which is bizarre,
Wow.
quite unexpected. So we are a women's only charity. We're women led, we're for women. We have women's only spaces. So we have workshop space where any women can come and get involved with furniture upcycling largely, but we do other crafts as well. And we are branching out to some extent into community crafts, run a couple of groups out in the community. We host a couple of groups at the minute, and we facilitate other things like we've got some sewing classes, we've got some woodcrafts classes and stuff like that.
Fantastic. And that's all based from, you're based at Fur Clemt?
We are,
the building?
yes.
Yeah.
We moved to Fur Clemt 2 years ago. After initially not having a base, then we had a base in the town centre that was privately rented, moved out of that into Fur Clemt and have gone from tiny room, medium room, now into a bigger room.
Fantastic.
And we've got 2 rooms now.
Wow. And I've just seen the other day you were doing is it a partnership piece of what you're doing with Fur Clemt, some funding you got off?
Yes. So we wrote it around Christmas time for WEA. Was successful in our
Fantastic.
funding, which is for a program called Keep It Together, or KIT for short.
Yeah.
And it's the idea of using the whole of the building to run lots and lots of sessions, evenings, weekends and daytime stuff that are for the community, but paired with a peer mentor, so it's a volunteer that can come and be that friendly face who might go on the sessions as well, who can benefit just as much. But if you need a bit of hand-holding or just a little bit of encouragement to get to a session or to feedback on if you didn't enjoy it and you want to do something else, they will just guide you through it.
Fantastic. And it's really good to see you grow. And I think, because I know obviously the work that we've obviously got more involved, obviously with yourself at ReMade over the last 6 to 12 months have been through the pop-up. So obviously we've got the pop-up shop at through Rebuild with Hope. And obviously you're one of the founder members of that, in terms of, I know obviously with it's great to see like you guys and other social enterprises out there take leadership of that, so hopefully that's something that
definitely
benefits.
So we make a lot of stuff. We don't always, we're not salespeople.
Yeah.
I'm not a salesperson, so we have a lot of stuff and we need to get it moved on and hopefully get an income from it as well. So we've always used online marketplaces, but we can't have a shop. It's really expensive to have a shop, so having the opportunity of having some shop space in Rebuild with Hope was really, really positive. It's been a real learning experience. There's a whole level of commitment involved in operating a real life retail space, and I think as a group of us, me and the other CICs, we're all learning together, and that's quite nice. And it's quite nice to do it in a space that isn't draining us economically. It's a good platform, I think, to go from.
Yeah, and that's been really good to see the group of you all come together to create that peer network, to share the way you all support each other in terms of the staffing, the day to day, but also the way you all kind of it just feels really refreshing to kind of see a group of like-minded social enterprises operating in different parts of the borough, in different neighbourhoods, coming together. So the key part of the podcast today, I've always believed your story, which I think I first saw probably about 2 to 3 months ago on LinkedIn. I think it was, I saw you put an article on about your governance structure and how you've moved from a CIC. So you set up as a CIC, did you? But you are now a
CIO.
So why did you make that change? Because I've always, over the years, probably the last 10 years, seen everybody talk about social enterprise as CIC. So it's, oh, you're part of the CIC sector, and everybody's always seemed to have guided people to branding us as CIC, social enterprise, but that's clearly not the case. So why did you make that change? Because for me, it's exactly sums up why CICs and social enterprises shouldn't just be exclusive.
Yeah, it was. So I set up as a CIC because I believe in social enterprise as something that bridges business and charity. And when I first heard about CICs ages ago, I was like, that's exactly where we should all be heading for. And that, yeah, it was a natural choice to do it because I knew that we were going to sell stuff. I knew that we were going to make furniture and we were going to sell it, and we could potentially do workshops, and that was going to be our earned income. As I got into it, I realised that while there was loads and loads of local support for being a social enterprise, setting up as one, there was lots of training. I was able to go on training with Flourish, which through the Time to Grow programme, which you came and gave talks on. I think we were one of the second cohorts to go through the Time to Grow programme. And we all sort of independently looked at being a CIC and sort of sorted it all out, and loads of us became CICs because of it. As I got into it, it was looking at primarily funding, and this was a largely funding driven decision, is that there isn't as much funding out there for CICs because we're perceived differently. It was really easy to set up as a CIC. It didn't take very long. Nobody really queried why you were doing what you were doing or looked at your articles of association or anything like that. So it was I suppose it's a quick fix to, I don't want to be just me. I want a proper name. I want to be respected. I want to look like a proper business. And that was it seemed like the right decision at the time. Couldn't apply for loads and loads of funding because they only accepted charities. Then we looked at sort of social investment side of things, but we weren't actually earning enough because we weren't trading sufficiently to go for a lot of match funded stuff that's available to CICs or social investment loans like Proper Good, because we couldn't afford to pay it back. Because a lot of our activities were fundamentally charitable activities. We're giving stuff away for free. We're not charging people for workshops. And it became like, either we're going to be a business that sells stuff and have very little room for the free stuff, which fundamentally is why we set it up. I set it up to be a safe space for women. And it looked like it was a choice between doing that or carrying on, persisting with the social enterprise element. Because trading is hard work. It's a whole load of skills, and it takes quite a lot of dedication. You can't just pop on eBay at the end of a day and pop something up for sale and expect it to actually sell. It just doesn't work. Tried it doesn't work. And you need to be at those markets, and you need to be building the customer bases, and you need to be acting like a proper business. And it's not saying that charities can't do some of that, but I didn't feel there was sufficient recognition of what CICs actually need to do through funders. Largely, you lead any of the lists, and the big ones won't fund you. All the small old trusts that are family made, they won't fund you. And I think, having gone down the Charities Commission application route, it's because all that governance, all those checks to make sure you're legitimate and you're a good organisation, get done by the Charities Commission. At the minute, I don't think they're done by the social enterprise regulation, because no one checked it. No one ever fed back, is that the right thing to do? Have you written enough social value into your stuff? No one checked. And I think that difference isn't helping social enterprises get the recognition that they need.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I mean, we obviously, when I set up Wigan League Community Charity, or formerly Abermore Community Cooperative, it was set up as a company limited by guarantee, and couple of years later bolted on a charity. So I've never really gone down that CIC route. But I know some people said to me in the early days, I remember somebody, I think it was somebody setting up a microbrewery, helping, I think it was men in isolation, but around making beer. I remember somebody at the time, this individual had been told about CIC and wanted to follow that route and actually applied. But I think it came to the element of they were putting their own money into this, and I think because of the nature, obviously, of a CIC, it's the asset lock, is it? Where you have to then, so if your company closes, the money goes to
whoever you've nominated.
Whoever you
run off
nominated
with it.
Yeah. So if you put 20,000 of your own money in, that is never going to see the light of day because that's going to go there. And it just fascinates you, right? Because I know when in the early days it always seemed to be, you know, you can get access to funding, you get access to this. I don't know, I've not done the survey, but I know I've spoken to a lot of people, and it has always felt that maybe a lot of CICs don't actually, like you say, they don't, maybe because they're not asked to do so, but don't actually deliver what CIC should do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always, it would be very easy, I think, if you didn't care about your community and you didn't want to do good, to pop in a little element that looked like you were doing good. So you could easily be a car manufacturer or something like that and give away 2 cars out of 1 million, and it would still fit loosely. I mean, it wouldn't fit ethically, but I think legally it would still be okay to be a CIC. And it doesn't, reputationally, that doesn't support the smaller groups who want to be a CIC and actually are doing good.
Yeah, and I think historically we've always had this challenge up in the sector, where there's always these new initiatives come in. I mean, I know I'm probably going back to around about 2012, 2013, when my kind of journey here started, and there seemed to be a lot of maybe government-led kind of initiatives, and it always seemed to be pushing you down the route of feeling like it was almost like a tick box exercise to be a CIC, because that person who had the commission to offer that business support was to be paid to say, there you go, you have to be a CIC, not because it was beneficial to the organisation, but it was beneficial to them achieving their funding. And I think it's interesting, and I don't know, we'll be interested to find out as the next few months or so as to how many of our sector, like I said, we roughly reckon we have about 250-ish social enterprises. But we are probably seeing that number change because a lot of charities might be themselves, don't see themselves as social enterprises, so therefore they just think, well, I'm not a CIC, so I'm not a social enterprise. But of those who are out there, whether some of them already, and there's yourself and there's another group, I can't remember, who have also all gone down that route of saying, we need to change now, we need to change this. So it will be interesting to see how the sector does change over the next few years. And that percentage of those who are charities, those who are just standard company limited by guarantees that can still access the funding and that. But yeah, I just think it's interesting because as a respected enterprise that you are, that more people need to realise that when they do sit down and they set up enterprise, that naturally it shouldn't just be, or if you are told from that person giving you the support, CIC, then just maybe to be the time and listen to what you're saying there and just think, don't go down that route. So you're a CIO, aren't you? You're a charitable incorporated organisation. So how does that differ compared to a normal registered charity, or would you say there's any differences in it?
Not hugely. No. We're still able to trade, and I think lots of charity. You think charity, you think, oh, you can't trade. You're allowed to still have a trading income. It's not vastly different. The difference is the level of inspection you get from the Charities Commission. The application process is long and arduous, certainly for me, because it's a lot of people pay to get somebody to do it for you because of the paperwork. And it's not rocket science, but it is detailed.
Yeah.
They will look at where every comma is.
Because you've still got to report to Companies House and the Charity Commission, or
so
do you have the
it's
one?
Charities Commission.
So you don't have to report to Companies House at all, right? But a normal registered charity, like we are, we have to report.
Well, you have to do your taxes still, but on with the CIC thing, you were doing Companies House, and I think that's it, isn't it? Because you don't actually have to submit any accounts or anything else to the regulator. You do with Charities Commission, that they hold your accounts and they hold your reports and things like that. So anybody can go on the Charities Commission. You can type in a charity and you can see who works there, who's involved, what they're doing, where their money comes from. So it's perhaps a bit more transparent than a CIC, because again, with Companies House accounts, there's not a lot of detail on there. It doesn't have to show where your money is coming from and where it's going to. It's very, very broad categories.
So you as the leader, the founder, how have you seen your role change from being a CIC to CIO?
Well, with CIC, I was in charge.
Exactly.
I was the founder and the big old leader. Now I have trustees, and they are now in charge of my charity. So it's no longer my charity; it's their charity, and I work for them. And that was a big thing for me, because I've worked with charities in the past, or for charities in the past, and I've seen how difficult relationships can be with trustees and the people who actually work in the charity day to day. If it's not supportive, it can be really destructive. It can really slow the progress of a charity. It can derail it entirely. Again, that was part of my thought process on setting up as a CIC. It was like, I don't want trustees to be able to tell me what to do with something I care so much about. So I spent some time figuring out who I could ask, who I could trust to be a trustee. And certainly within our infancy as a charitable organisation, I didn't want people to come in who I didn't know, because they could decide to go in a completely different direction than I wanted to. And as a founder, that's quite difficult. I appreciate it might happen eventually, but I wanted to at least go a couple of years without that happening.
It is fascinating, because it's that challenge in it that and I do wonder whether that is what puts a lot of people off. Listening to the podcast, for example, people might be thinking, actually, I do maybe need to become a CIO, but you're right, that is always going to be the bomb barrier. And you're right, I think it's always felt that, certainly when I know through my experience, that there's almost like two different opinions of what trustees are. Some kind of feel like it's everything, it's the whole role. We are the managers and you are a employee. But a lot of, like yourself, like myself and a few others, out there, when you found it, it is hard to let go and let other people. Sometimes you don't want to just have a lot of yes people there, because you want challenge, you want somebody to come in and bring that knowledge. But I think having that skills. So have you had to go down the route of looking at, right, I need a skills analysis? Where are the gaps that complement any gaps, if you have any gaps in your knowledge, where people come in rather than just people kind of coming in to say, I'm going to do this?
I have lots of gaps.
We all have gaps. I've got many.
One thing about being a CIC, it's really lonely doing it all by yourself. It's hard working with other people, full stop, no matter whether they're a co-director, somebody in your team, or a trustee. So I think getting over that and going, sometimes help is good. And I was getting to the point with the CIC that it's too much for one person to do this. It's a lot of responsibility to bear, to go both operationally and strategically. So I wanted trustees that could help with some very specific bits, like money is not my strong point. I needed somebody with some financial understanding, especially with a charity, because it is different the way you report on your money and you account for your money. So that was a big part of it. But also I was looking for people that have got a good network, because I would love ReMade to get contracts and not have to rely on grants. And you need to know people
Yeah.
to do that. It's not like it's an old boys society, but you need I wanted somebody with some experience in that, because I can't just jump into that from nowhere.
Yeah. I think that helps, you know, like I say, having people who come in who know they can complement, you know, and like I say, identify those gaps that you have, does make a huge difference. Because you're right, it's interesting, of all, when we said before about all the CICs out there, to so many we know might have 2 or 3 other directors, but usually it ends up being sole trader type way that they approach. And we know with this day and age, with obviously, like I say, accountancy and all the business planning and applying for funding, a lot of people now are looking at, like I say, social accountancy, the whole social impact measurement. It just, I think it's hard for anybody who's not a social entrepreneur or a leader to actually understand the it's hard sometimes getting the work-life balance in it, because you do so much, and we do live and breathe with, like I say, it's that social bit that drives us to do this. But you know,
the scope of what you need to
we don't finish at 5 o'clock on a
ridiculous.
Friday or 12 o'clock on a Friday and say, right, I'm finished now, I'm going to go early and have a weekend. It's like, yeah, there's
No, absolutely. I wouldn't say moving to a charity has fixed the work-life balance either. There's a great Facebook group called Small Charity CEOs, and that regularly has people coming on to go like, oh my God, why do I do this job? It's too hard. Because nobody's working 35-hour weeks. We might be contracted to do that. We're not. We're doing like 50, 60 hours, never switching off. You dream about it. We're not the people to look up to if you want a healthy life balance. Don't do that.
And it's interesting because I know obviously another piece of work that we're both involved in, this new Wigan Borough voluntary community faith social enterprise group that we're part of. I've started looking over the last few months, and obviously, as you know, we've got groups like Wigan and Lee Hospice, Embrace Wigan and Lee, AIDS UK and the Brick, part of the 14 people of us around the table. And it's been interesting to see some of their conversations over the last few meetings where, they themselves as CEOs or whatever, how they've kind of, the challenges that they have. So for me, we're starting to come together in terms of that peer network. Because, we're all lucky, we're all based in buildings that are shared occupancy with other social enterprises. And just for me, having those to bounce off, and because you're right, we do go home every day, don't we? And we, the weight of the world on us, and there's so many things to do, and it's always feel like we're firefighting, aren't we? That it's just nice to know that whether it's trustees or other directors or whatever, that they're there to have something too.
I think the other thing about being a sole trader or a sole entrepreneur and things like that, if you live in your own like echo chamber, don't you? And you don't necessarily have somebody going, do you know what, that's a great idea, but don't do that now. Or you get really going off on one, don't get distracted by that. And you need other people to go, this bit's good, don't do this bit. And you don't get that when you're on your own. The network of it's been eye-opening for me, because I don't know, I labour under the assumption that everyone else has got it all sorted out, and they live their lives and are doing their organisations like so smoothly and not coming up with any challenges. Apparently that's not true. Everybody's pretty much in the same boat. And I think now we have to sort of almost collaborate and look after each other more. It's sad times when you switch on social media, go on LinkedIn, and another charity's folded, another group's gone under, and it's not through them being bad organisations. It's the environment that we're in, the pressures politically and economically that are driving people out of business. And you think, wow, you've gone, and I was trying to emulate you. Like, where do I look next? How do we stop that happening? That's a huge amount of pressure. And when you're a CEO looking after a bigger, I have 2 freelancers to look after. There's CEOs in our group that have 40 full-time staff. That's a big salary bill. That's a lot of people's livelihoods, and they're looking at you to keep that going. And I think the responsibility of that is enormous.
Yeah.
And I will also mention that the fact that we all get paid to do this. We do get salaries, but those salaries are not big.
Yeah.
I remember a comment was somebody put, one of the other CEOs put something on Facebook. The Facebook comments were very much like, "Well, you should be doing that for free. What do you mean you get paid? What you guys get paid too much?" I'm thinking, no, what? Genuinely, we don't get a discount on your mortgage for working for a charity. You don't get zero. You don't get free Asda shops or something like that. You still have to live, and you're still bearing the responsibility of running organisations that might be turning over millions of pounds, but somehow we're expected to do it with less resources, less money, and less work-life balance.
You don't have any mortgages. You all live off Thresher. That's what you do. You don't have any bills. It is, and it is so frustrating. And when we're start measuring the impact of what the sector has and the amount of changes we're making in reducing pressure on public sector organisations and anchor organisations, you do think we should be paid to do this. But there is so many misconceptions, and it's really refreshing to kind of, like you say, see the sector, certainly the last 2 to 3 years, it really kind of grow. And I think that partnership working, we said before, with like the pop-up shop, and we mentioned before your partnership that you do obviously with Fur Clemt, it's really refreshing to see, and I think that's why us all working in that partnership way is great. But it's also interesting as well, because I know some of the work that you do away from ReMade, because you don't just have ReMade, that's your business, but you do other roles as well, don't you? Because I think I know one of the first times I remember seeing you outside of ReMade was at a GM event. I think it was last year, and I was like, "Oh, Alistair's here."
Yeah, the wealth building thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh," and it was fascinating to kind of. And I know you spoke to me last year around the Alternative Provider Federation. I think it was. So all these other roles you do, are they similar kind of to ReMade, or you do? And I think that's what we say. So many of us on Peru, we don't just do the one role. We do other work as well. It's voluntary or whatever. So
I don't think it's definitely not an entrepreneurial thing. It's more of slight nosiness, and I want the best for Wigan and its community and the people that don't necessarily have a voice. ReMade's one of those vehicles, I think. So I'm a trustee over at Tameside Mind, and that's been a journey in itself, because I've never been a trustee before, never thought of myself as a trustee, and that's a whole different side of the table to sit on. So that's I'd recommend that to anybody, even if you don't think you're senior enough. I still don't. I still think I'm an imposter every time I'm sat around the table. I work a lot with Angela and Jill over in Springfield and Beach Hill, and that
in the community corner building?
They've just started the community corner building, but they do Northern Heart and Soul.
That's right.
And the Springfield and Beach Hill Community Association, and that has made me take a wider view on how our community functions together, which then also led me to the Dispersed Leadership Board, and that was the interest in applying for that. And I'm also a fellow on the Public Health programme, which is a Greater Manchester thing. And it is about sort of looking outside of where you're comfortable in and going, we all interact with each other. You can't have one woman's success is not depending on ReMade. It depends on so many other factors. A lot of those are things that I can't control, and no one person can control, but we could potentially influence this wider system around us. But it comes from, I want people to be living better. I want people to have opportunity, and if that means going to scary meetings and turning up to podcasts, then I'll do it.
And it's interesting, like you say, because I'm lucky. I sit on a couple of primary school governor boards, and I kind of always go and thinking, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a parent, so I wouldn't really have that kind of belief to say, yes, I can go and tell you, the person who studied teaching for years, what to do. But equally, having said that, though, it is interesting, like you say, to get some of that learning as to what I've always felt. Some of the learning of what I've had being a governor myself, I've kind of seen some of that, what I'd like to see for my trustees or the trustees that we have. So it's interesting you say there that some of these other roles that we take on board, and I would always advise, like you said, the other leaders of social enterprises to get involved in other, other bits of, other voluntary work and boards, because it does bring so much knowledge together as to of other, maybe it's education, maybe it's other different sectors, whether it's kind of, well, like I say in this case, what you'd like your company to be. Mm-hmm. So I do think it should be something, you're right, that I'd always advise more people to, not that we've got a lot of time on our hands to get involved.
No, there's never enough time. But you do, it's kind of, and then it enables me to take information that I might hear or learn and go, when somebody has a random conversation with me about starting their own thing, I'm like, have you thought about this? Or look at this, and look at this paper. Somebody's written this website. This is a really good way of putting something out there. Yeah. Because I'm a bit obsessed with it. Yeah. That's all my social media feed is about the voluntary community work and things like there's furniture and there's community works and cats. That's about it. And I just think about it an awful lot, and I want other people to share in that information. I like it to be transparent. It would be great if I don't like the way that you have to be in a room to be part of that conversation. Yeah. There's a lot of people who can't make it around those tables. So if I'm around the table, I'm not there as for my benefit. I'm there for everybody's benefit. That's how I try and see it.
So in terms of the sector itself, the social enterprise sector, in the years since you set up ReMade, where do you see the sector moving to? Is it moving in a positive way, a backwards way? Is it standing still? Where do you see the sector moving, and where do you see it growing next? Put it on the spot.
That's a really big question. I see it under more pressure than it ever has been, because it's not a voluntary sector. No. And it shouldn't be a voluntary sector. We're not volunteers. We shouldn't be relying on volunteers, but yet we are still often valued on how many volunteer hours we have. How many volunteers do you have in your organisation? What are the volunteers doing? Like, we can't rely on volunteers to deliver services to some of the most vulnerable people in our society. We just can't. I mean, today I've left 12 women in the workshop. They've been brought there by different organisations. Some have self-referred, but the other organisations have been paid to support those women, and they have, quite rightly so, brought them along to the workshop because they wanted to enjoy it. ReMade doesn't get paid to host those people, and that's happening to more and more organisations in this sector. We are hosting and supporting people that other organisations are being paid to support. We are doing more and more stuff that would have been done at day centres, for example, or community centres, and that just don't exist anymore. The whole spectrum of need has shifted, so social workers aren't looking after people preventatively. They're looking after people at point of crisis when there is no other option. So all that preventative stuff is falling on the social sector of social enterprises and charities or trading organisations or small groups that aren't necessarily equipped to cope with it. People come with complexities. People come with a lot of need. We're talking to people who've had multiple experiences of assault, who are suicidal, who are at verge of homelessness, who are experiencing horrible stuff going on in life and huge problems, and we're trying to deal with it all with less money and less resource than we had 5 years ago. So I want to see it pivot and go like, do you know what, we're going to take responsibility for this. We're going to go, no, don't give that £1 million to adult social care. Give it directly to us. We will deliver the social care because we can. And I want the sector to have the gumption to be able to stand up and say that and go, we will make it work. Because I can't see it going any other way. I can't see a future where we carry on with sort of the NHS and social work, social care on its knees, not being able to deliver stuff. Communities are going to be the ones that have those answers and have those solutions, and therefore they need to be resourced to do it. If we could be part of that alternative structure, that would be really good.
And people self-referring who may not be in the system. They might not be going to the GP. I know a few years ago, many people might know we used to have the Wigan men's sheds based at Plattbridge Community Zone, and the story you mentioned just resonates so much to what I saw them have experienced, where they didn't want to charge the guys to come in. If anything, our building was almost like an alternative to the pub for them. The community was changing, the pubs were shutting down, the guys wanted somewhere first and foremost to chat. They might not be on the GP radar, they might not go to the GP, but they had barriers and they felt they could get off the men's sheds, but that was voluntary. There was no charge to it. And then eventually, some of the guys would obviously develop the skills and go on to make products, but the men's sheds didn't want to charge. And then, as you said there, it started to become a day provider. It started to become a different thing. And then eventually, we just started to see more and more referrals from anchor organisations. And those paid workers, like you say, were often, it's frightening to say, and I've mentioned this to many people in the past, they would be, like I say, they're being paid a good amount. And they wouldn't even, they would just sit in the car. They'd have they'd bring the individual along, right, there you go to the men's sheds, and they'd just sit in the car, probably social mediaing for 2 hours, being paid. And then the poor gentleman running the men's sheds, who's not being paid, who's probably just had to try and write a funding bid, because that's the only way he can kind of sustain his salary. And it just made, and then unfortunately, like you say, the pressure through self-referrals built, the pressure through anchors referring in, assuming it was always, we just assumed you were paid to do this. Like, no, they're not paid to do it. And that pressure told. And post-COVID, around about September 2021, it closed. Yet to this day, nearly 3 years later, we still get phone calls from people saying, and I do look back, and I've spoke to a few groups, NHS, other anchor organisations, to say, should have learnt better from that. Let's not make the same mistake happen. But hearing you say that sounds like things haven't changed in the last 3 years.
No, unfortunately, yeah. So social prescribing as a theory, really good. I genuinely believe the money should go with the person, not to necessarily the organisation. If it followed people through, so I don't know what amount of money you would need, but something that went with that person to go wherever they go, we'll fund you. That would work, but it doesn't happen.
No.
There's a definite difference in the way that happens in different areas of the country. Wigan has not done it that way for whatever reason. And the longer term impact, I think, on social organisations who are trying to provide that service in the community is like you say, the pressure gets too much. The amount, I've had a couple of weeks where all the facilitators of spaces have come and gone like, it's just awful, and they've been crying and going like, I can't keep doing this. So that's, it's very negative for a podcast, but it's the reality of it, is that we're needing to prop each other up more and more and more, just to keep it going, and we want to, but it's a bit difficult at the minute.
And it is, and it's in something as well you say in the beginning about us always being perceived as a sector in the voluntary sector. And I know a senior politician in Greater Manchester, I was at an event probably about 18 months ago, and that the conversation did seem to suggest, should a sector we be more, because we're always part of the voluntary community faith source in the private sector, but people still to this day still call it voluntary community sector. But then over here you've got like the business sector, and there was a conversation around, should we merge more with that, or should we suddenly be part of the, because ultimately what we want is all these businesses to do as we do, you know, social first, you know, profit second, be more ethical. But should we be more in working with the private sector and the business sector rather than always being seen as part of the funding sector, the voluntary sector? And like I say, hopefully things will start to kind of change with stuff going on. But it's interesting, like I say, since I started to look at some, you know, the sector around about 2012, it's a shame how a lot of our groups probably, again, we're looking at stuff at the minute in terms of some of the surveys that's going to go out soon to the sector, but a lot of our sector do probably turn, is it probably less than 20,000 a year? It is such a, but when you start to look at the impact that the groups have in reducing the pressure, it's just astronomical. It's amazing. So more groups should start to be like this, but it is frustrating. And just even you say that, then it's like, because I've not been involved in some of that adult social care work close as I was when we used to have the men's sheds in our building, and it used to just and what it played on that mental well-being of that leader, trying to do everything together and seeing people getting paid and they're not being paid, and it just, and I think it was such a shame that when men's sheds, certainly, and obviously hopefully the same does happen with ReMade, just those kind of conversations where people just, the minute it wasn't there, it's like, oh, has it gone to? It's like, well, you should have really played a bit of a part on that if you just commissioned that or looked at it slightly different or just took the time to realise that maybe it would still be doing. Obviously there are great groups out there now taking the mantle of what the men's sheds were trying to do, but it feels like you're witnessing the same.
It would be nice to think, so we've got the voluntary sector accord now,
Yeah.
which is supposed to be people looking at organisations and going, no, we're not going to just give you bits of money here and there when we fancy it, we're going to commission you properly so you can actually sustain and develop a workforce, that sort of thing. And it would be good to see that trickle down and go like, no, this is actually making a difference now. Because I think the will is there. When you speak to people in adult social care, they're like, we want to support you. It's just it's wanting to see that in real life now.
So maybe what we need to do in the next podcast is get somebody here, you know, so there's 2 chairs here, but we need somebody, please, from adult social care to come on. Out. Come along. We're here to do it, and then, you know, hopefully, you know, yourself, and we can let you lead the podcast next time. So, thanks for that, Alice. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
Good to chat to you.
Thank
Cheers,
you,
Alice.
Dave.
Bye bye.